Welcome to another episode of Repairers Realm. We're here today to talk a little bit more about compressed air filtration. I'm TJ O'Rourke, one of the subject matter experts here at the Appleton Tech Center, and we're lucky enough to be joined by...
Hi, I'm Tony Larimer with SADA USA Incorporated.
And I'm Jeff Poole. I lead the subject matter expert team here at ICAR. And I'm happy to have Tony with us here today. He came over to help us with some equipment upgrades. A couple of years ago, there was an episode of Repairers Realm that Tony was predominantly, starred in. Gave us a lot of great information about air filtration, both breathing air and for gun use. And there were some things in there that scared me a little bit. Some things I didn't know that really opened my eyes as we looked at some of our equipment in-house. And some of the equipment in-house was put in 2000 when this facility was built. And while maintenance was pretty good through the years for the most part, I will say that it was a little bit dated on the equipment. So met you out there at SEMA.
Yep, at the SEMA show.
And we got to chat, and I, quite frankly, I'd met with a few other vendors as well. And I really liked the solution that you offered so far as the upgrades to our equipment. So we'll be taking a closer look at that here today. Yep. With the equipment upgrades, we had to be prepared to first remove the old equipment and then go through the installation process of the new equipment. And so I'm going to have you kind of take us on that journey just a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, so when we got here, we found black pipe, of course, was what was plumbed in and through an existing system. So first step was planning a little bit after talking about what your goal was. And obviously the goal in this case was to get clean air for breathing. And so for breathing in the booth and the prep deck. And so that was where we started. We took a look at a little plan. Prior to coming here, you had sent me photos so that we had a pretty good plan. And Brad Gravenoff, who runs our Dan-Am Air division, was good enough to give me some hints on what he would do. And so we had a pretty good plan when we got here. So myself and Ross Blazer, our local representative, were able to do that, and it didn't take very long to change out the old system and in with the new.
Right.
And so, that involves a few things. It involved, first of all, we used an aluminum airline system that we call Dan-Am Air, so I'll grab just a couple pieces of that to show you, as well as...
So mind you, our system set up here, we've got a prep deck and a booth, and we've got a mixing room in between. And all of our equipment mounts behind the mixing room in between. So where we're looking at our breathing air filtration, we're sharing that, branching it off in two different directions as we look at the install and our situation, which might not be optimal, but we'll talk through that.
Yeah, we'll go through that. So simply, we used an aluminum piping that we call Dan-Am Air. This is 25 millimeters, so roughly 1 inch inside diameter. Very smooth bore, very easy to move air through it. Keeps things contaminant free. We used fittings that we were able to attach with the threaded connection into your existing threaded connection. So that was nice. We had some union points. We had some locations where we did have to cut out some black pipe, but we had a place where we had a 90 or an elbow that we could thread right into to go on and make the connections with our push to connect technology. So by using the push to connect technology, it's just that simple. Literally, the fittings are already pre-torqued. It presses in and it's connected. And that's all there is to it. So it's a really simple installation. And so we did that, and we've got a ton of different fittings, everything from 90s to straight ahead components and stuff, but we could plan where we had to route that and try. The challenge is to use as few of these connections as you need to. And so in one of the instances, we were able to take the 25 millimeter and a standard conduit bender and bend the pipe into the angle to fit perfectly in where it had to go.
So that's the existing equipment there that behind us that was removed. And the filtration system we're installing is there.
And so once we got that out of the way, again, it took us just a couple of hours, and we had all the connections made, installed a CO monitor. We installed a new regulator inside the paint booth that has the ability to plug into unregulated air. So if you wanted to blow something off, and as well as 2 ports for regulated air, so you could hook up a spray gun and breathing equipment. And so all of that stuff was installed yesterday. And So a little bit about the heart of that whole system was, what do we use for air filtration to get us clean air that we can breathe in the shop? The good thing was, here at this shop, we have refrigerated dryers, and we have good air source, a good air source with 2 compressors that give us plenty of air volume. So that was already done. But when we took a look at the filtration, we wanted to make certain that we put something in that would give us clean breathing air.
Right.
You know, with the benefit of having.
So what we also needed was something that's simple for us to maintain.
Yeah.
And to do the, I want to say, the filter change outs at the right intervals, and we'll talk through that.
Yep, we'll get through that. So this is a system that we decided to go with. It's our 500 series filter. We have these in multiple versions. This one's our 3-stage with a regulator. The one that we put behind the booth does not have the regulator on it because we mounted it outside the booth and we put the regulator inside the paint booth. They're the same properties, same maintenance, same everything, just this one on the display here has a regulator built in. So then we, but when we were talking about it, the big key was, well, how much of the shop are we needing to clean the air for?
Right.
But the good thing was, because we can, with this system, it allows 136 CFM, so we can do both the booth and the prep deck. We could run.
That's about 4 times what we had flow capacity wise before.
Yeah. When we looked at that, I think we were both a little surprised at how low their CFM was in the other system. And so with this one being able to we literally could hook multiple painters to this, using breathing hoods, using spray guns, using air coolers, blowers for waterborne, all of that stuff off of one filter.
Now, we're not a production shop here, but how many technicians would you say that could support?
So when we run the math using a breathing hood at an estimate of around 10 CFM each, but using an HVLP spray gun is 15 CFM roughly for most HVLPs. We can run a air cooler system, which somewhere between 6 and 10 CFM. So we can run 4 technicians fully equipped with air cooler, breathing hood, paint guns, and still have enough left to run air dryer blowers in each booth. So that it is, we call it, it's a 4-technician filter system. It just means that things have to be plumbed correctly after the filter to go to both booths, if you have 2 booths, or if you have a prep deck and a booth or whatever. But in this situation, it was the prep deck and the paint booth. So it was pretty simple because you had things plumbed for that prior. I think we eliminated a lot of extra airlines and made it look pretty clean the way it sets up now.
So with this filtration setup that's here, can you walk us through the basic maintenance of it?
Yeah, the maintenance is pretty simple. So on this system, we have three canisters here. All 3, the service is required to be done at 6 months, where some of our previous versions, the first 2 were at 6 months, and the 3rd stage was every 3 months. So this is much easier to remember. And so we literally every 6 months, this first stage, and you'll see how easy this 500 series is removed, just a little 1/8 of a turn. Inside this canister, it is a polished aluminum, but it has an auto water discharger or auto drain that's on the bottom that is fully automatic. So even under full air pressure, it will still purge when moisture gets inside the float level. And so it's not like some where they only purge when you get down close to 0 air. This one will purge at all times. So it comes with a hose that you can run into a container, and so that makes it pretty simple. So you don't have to worry if it's drained or not, because it always does. Inside is a yellow cyclone device that's just there to spin the larger particles to the outside and drain. And inside it has a pretty simple system, but it's a 5-micron sintered bronze element that's pretty large surface area on this. So it will collect debris on the outside. It's O-ringed on the bottom and at the top inside the cylinder, so the air has to go through it. You take that out once every 6 months. You can wash the plastic components in soapy water and dry them. The sintered bronze element, you use a clean thinner and clean that, or acetone, and clean that with a soft scrub brush and blow it completely dry. Once that's blown completely dry, it just goes back in, and it drops back in to the canister and then reattaches.
And I think you had mentioned something about all of this is color coded.
And it is color coded. So the nice part is on the obviously the Cyclone is yellow. There's a yellow stripe on the canister, as well as on the top of the filter unit. I don't know if you'll be able to see that or not, but there is a yellow, big yellow dot on the top of that cylinder so that we know.
And corresponding blue and black on the others.
And for the others, yep. So the second stage is the fine filter. This is removed and replaced every 6 months. So this filter is down to 0.01 microns. So that is clean enough for breathing air if you're wearing a carbon unit on your belt. In this case, on this filter, we put the carbon element on the filter. And the reason for that carbon filter being on this element is not just for breathing, but also for spraying air. So now if you're spraying waterborne and you need all traces of oil vapor or contaminants like that, that eliminates it, but it also eliminates any odors. And so that's pretty nice for the breathing air system. And so the third stage, which is also every 6 months, it's a very large centered carbon element. And anybody that's had one of our older SATA filters, there was a membrane that had a cloth and a metallic enclosure over it. They chose to go this route because that one was every 3 months you had to replace it. So this one, larger cylinder, all sintered carbon, and so it lasts for 6 months. So very, very low maintenance. So literally this just drops back in, and all of these cartridges, when you put the new cartridge in, it drops in and just attaches, and you'll turn it and you'll hear it click. So you know when that clicked that it's correct.
So does my cartridge expiration, is that affected by volume of use or things of that nature, or is it really just kind of 6 months? And
It is 6 months, and the reason for that being is because we're dealing with air that could have humidity in it and air, and if you let them go longer than 6 months, the safety of not having mold or bacteria growing on the cartridges kind of goes away. So for us, it isn't, in many cases someone may say, well, I don't paint that often, in a vocational school or in a training application like here.
In our situation,
It's best to just follow the 6 month guideline so that we don't get into any of those situations where it may have grown bacteria or mold.
Good to know.
But again, pretty simple system, even from the side. Go like this. Let's see.
Yeah, it's a little easier when you're facing it straight and it's on the wall.
Slides up and just quickly connects. So pretty simple system.
Right.
So that part of it, the maintenance on it is really, really easy. And it does come with, and I don't have it in here, it comes in with what's called a filter timer that just slides in and literally has a button you press, and that starts the process of a red line that climbs to the top. And so over that 6 month period, it'll be fully red to the top as a visual reminder that it's
So I noticed on this one, I think there's 2 outlets here.
Yep.
And on our installation in the booth, there's 2, I think, on the unregulated side, and then there's 2 on the regulated side.
Yes.
Talk to us a little bit about air hoses going to guns and air hoses going to hoods and things like that.
Well, good question. For the breathing hoods, we have hoses that we call them PrimaFlex, and they are a static-free, hose, and so that's important. It needs to be, but they're also a breathing hose in that they have a liner inside that doesn't let any moisture wick from the outside in or contaminants. So if they're laying on the floor that you got overspray on, or in some solvent shops they're still wetting the booth floor down, well, your hose lays on that, it can suck it through, if you use a hose that's not breathing air rated. And so with ours, it's got a liner so that can't come through the hose, so you get no contamination. But it also has a banding through the hose so that if you run it over with a car, it can't shut the air off to your breathing hose. And so those are important pieces for a breathing hose. Right. And so we use those same hoses for painting air, but we do have 2 connections on the filter or on the regulators. On most of our regulators are at least 2. The one we put here has 4. Like I said, 2 of them are unregulated, so if you want to have higher pressure to blow something off, you sure can. But the regulated side is nice, so you can set it for a comfortable air pressure for your spraying or breathing air, but it's also there to regulate it for your spray gun air. And so we do require, in the U.S., there is a requirement. When we get looking at a breathing hood, we'll talk about that again, but we are required to have 2 hoses in the United States. And it's just because of the NIOSH approvals. And other parts of the world, they may be able to run a whip hose from their belt unit legally. Here, it requires 2 hoses.
Okay.
We can take a look, if you'd like, at the breathing hood.
Yeah.
So the breathing hood system has a belt that you just wear, and it has a removable regulator on here that can slide off, and this is all we need on our hip.
So that is just, I'm going to say, a manifold or
It's just a manifold, or
regulator
just
type setup.
we just call it a
But no
our belt
filtration happening
regulator.
in
There's no
that one.
filtration, and we can use this when we have the 3-stage filter with the carbon on it, so we can use this. However, if we chose to just go with the 2-stage filter that only has the water cyclone and it has the fine filter system, if you're going to breathe that air, you do need to have carbon, and that's where we have a belt unit that looks like this. That inside of this side there is a carbon filter. It's a small carbon filter, but that needs to be replaced every 3 months. And so for us, we like to take a look at it. And if you're a one-man shop, you're spraying solvent, you're not spraying waterborne, so you're not so concerned with contamination getting into the paint and causing contaminated paint jobs, then the 2-stage filter may be all you need. But if you want to breathe that air, we have a carbon filter that just snaps onto your belt, and you can change that once every 3 months. But if you're getting where you have more than one painter, you've got a couple painters, and every 3 months, rather than just doing one on the wall every 6 months and going with this regulator, that would be my likely choice, is to go to that and making sure I have the cleanest air possible for breathing air and for spraying air, just having the carbon built into the filter like we just showed.
Right.
We do have a couple of accessories that are kind of nice for the breathing hood. One of them is an air cooler, and this is the most popular one here in the U.S. You're in Arizona or New Mexico, or you're in California, or here in the summer when it's 90 out or more. This attaches on your belt. It just literally goes on the opposite side of your hip as your regulator, and you plug your hood into the top of the cooler, and this just goes around behind your back and plugs into your belt unit. And so with this air cooler, we can adjust the cooling effect at the bottom so it exhausts more hot air or less hot air being exhausted, and it'll literally cool the air up to 61 degrees Fahrenheit. And so when it's super hot, when they're running a bake cycle, and then you go back in that booth, and sometimes in the summer it'll never get below 100 degrees in there. And then when we get into some of the hotter states, it may never get below 120 in the booth.
Right.
This thing is a great choice. But we also have an air warmer, and we sell less of these here, but it is for locations where a compressor may be outside, or you're running a refrigerant dryer in your shop, which is nice because that's what's being done here. And if you're in that booth all day and it's blowing cool air on you, we can do the same thing. We can adjust this and it evacuates the cold
That's
air.
good to know about that one, because there have been
Yep.
times I've used the hood here, and in the middle of winter when it's negative 20 outside, even though
Yep.
we've got heat on in the building, we're still drawing shop air to our system. But sometimes it's getting a little cool.
Yeah, so that's nice. So you can warm the air up. And, you know, some people, they're sensitive to air conditioned air blowing on them all day long. And so for this, it gives a little bit of a warmer feeling under the hood. So that part makes it comfortable in both hot or cold seasons. But yes, the big question is, can we breathe the air? And with the filtration system, we have a CO monitor here. We have a refrigerant dryer on board. We have auto drains on your compressors. I mean, really, it's a good system to plug into.
We were, I think, pleasantly surprised whenever we started cutting the black pipe open that inside, while there is a little bit of residual crud, it's not horrible.
It isn't as bad as we've seen. You know,
I was going to say, you're sharing some stories about some of the things you've seen out there, and
it didn't grow shut. So that is the case. But because you had the system that you have on board, we didn't eliminate all of the black pipe in this situation. We eliminated everything that we had to make it clean and functional. There is some left that we're hoping for a future upgrade that we can do.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the one downfall is, short term we hadn't planned out a lot of this very well on our end, and so lessons learned there. But we've got opportunity. So, while we've got black pipe feeding it, that's one thing, and it's relatively clean inside and not unloading a bunch of debris. But there is still some of the black pipe after the filtration, and ideally we'd like to eliminate that in the future.
I think that's going to be the plan. And then again, we plumb things, try to keep it simpler and easy to adapt if you need to.
So take us through the CO monitor a little more in depth, because in that other episode, I think it was mentioned, but there wasn't a lot of detail.
Okay, let's move some of our toys.
So I think first with the CO monitoring, helping us understand, how does carbon monoxide get into our compressed air? Because I was of the belief that it was something that the compressor was doing itself.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of the pretty common thoughts. And your compressor isn't going to make carbon monoxide unless it's something that's burning. So it either have to be so hot that it's melting to cause that. Would be the only option for the compressor.
It would have to be so hot that it's actually burning oil.
Yes, right.
And at that point, it's probably seizing up.
Yes, it is. And so that isn't where it usually comes from. It is whatever the intake for your compressor is drawing in, that's where the carbon monoxide could come from. So you have to take a look at where's your compressor room, where's it going to be? Because if it's in a small room without ventilation from outside into the room, and it also may have a hot water heater or something like that in there that can produce CO, then you'd have to look at just ventilating it, running a pipe from outside into the compressor's intake. The other things are common in a shop. Obviously, if there's welding being done in the shop and they're welding close to a air compressor that isn't vented from outside, it could draw the welding fumes and the CO from that burn could go into the system. And exhaust, automobile exhaust. So you have to watch where your compressor is so that we know that you're not having cars being serviced or running somewhere near it. And that even goes as far as even if you're vented from outside, so that you don't have an area where someone would park a delivery vehicle that's bringing parts to your shop or whatever, as long as they're not sitting there with their van idling or truck idling, running exhaust into your intake. So those are some of the things. We just really have to take a look at where your compressor is, and then take a look so that we know that it's not going to draw carbon monoxide in. But one of the requirements to prove grade D air is below 10 parts of carbon monoxide. And so this monitor has all of the features that it needs. It has an LED screen that'll tell you how many parts per million you have. It has a blinking, a green light that's on, so you know it's on. It has a little red flashing light that lets you know it's sensing. It has a very loud audible alarm, and we set that off this morning to show that. That's quite loud. It has a silence button, so you can shut that off while you're looking at it to figure out the reason.
Right.
But this one's cool because it even has another port on the side, and that port on the side is to plug in. We can run that to a servo, and it can run to an extra loud buzzer. So in a large facility where maybe large truck shops, large facilities that may be spread out into a very large building, and then we even have a strobe that can go on. And so we're using those sometimes when we're in places that are painting everything from buses to trains to whatever, and it may be very loud with multiple booths running.
Right.
And so that blinking beacon is something that they also see, and the buzzer's extremely loud.
So after the installation, you'd kind of walk me through the operation of that, and it's pretty straightforward. It just has a little bleed air hose that goes to it off of the filtered air.
Yeah, so when we look, let's see if we can snap that on there. Over here, there's just a little prong, just a small barb. And on the back side, we have a compression fitting with a small barb on it. So this comes with, I think it's around 15 feet of a black air supply hose. And it comes with an entire bag full of different fittings, so you can connect it somewhere to your air source. We like to have it connected after the filter, so that you know what this is sensing is also what you're breathing. And so we found, luckily here, we had a good spot with a connection that wasn't being used after the filter. And so we were able to plumb that 1/2-inch pipe thread piece in and it has a 1/4-inch adapter in the center of it that has a compression fitting that let us just hook to that hose, and then we plug it into this, and this plugs into 110. And luckily, the area right behind your booth is not explosion-proof area, and that's where all the wiring is for the booth and plug-in, so we had a convenient place to plug it in. So really, this was a pretty ideal spot to put that.
Now, after that's plumbed in, is there any maintenance or anything to keep that operating?
They do need to be calibrated once a year. And so every 12 months, we do a calibration on it, which we did one this morning. The calibration on this, there's just a lock on the side that opens this up. And there's a little panel here with these little potentiometer screws on them. And there's this little black panel. There's 3 screws. One says 0, one says span, and one says alarm. The alarm screw is to set how high does the CO have to be before it alarms. And OSHA, or NIOSH, says in ours, in any automotive body shops, it has to be at 10 parts per million or less. So the alarm goes off at 10 parts per million, which is extremely safe. You know, when we look at home, when we see a CO monitor for a home with impending death or danger, those models of CO monitors for at home go off at 600 or 800 parts per million.
So I want to take just a second here to reinforce the importance. CO being overwhelmed by carbon monoxide poisoning, it will make you feel dizzy, nauseous, and a multitude of different symptoms. Make you feel a little intoxicated. There have been a lot of folks that have died from carbon monoxide poisoning and not even know it because it's odorless and tasteless.
Right.
And it's something that we got to take really seriously. Hopefully in our homes and our businesses we're safe and we've got monitoring in place. I know I replaced all of the CO monitors in my home here very recently, and encourage folks out there to do the same.
But the safety level at 10 parts per million is extremely low. I mean, they will allow, in a car dealership, you can be in an 8-hour workday in up to 45 parts per million, and it's safe.
Yeah.
So at 10 parts per million, they really set it pretty low. And that's...
Well, I want to know early on, personally. If there's something wrong with my air supply.
Yeah, I would like to know early,
and it's
too.
not like I'm not a refinish technician, but there are times where I'll use this with my welding helmet, and with some good breathable air, helps me out quite a bit with keeping a good air environment right there in my welding helmet. So how does this work over here? Well,
we did bring in a calibration kit, and in the calibration kit you have one that's nitrogen, and this is a pure nitrogen, so that brings your 0 screw or check-in to make sure to clean out your system.
Yep.
That goes down to 0, and then in this kit we have a 50 parts per million carbon monoxide, and on here there's a screw called span. And so all we did was we connect a pretty simple pressure valve or flow valve that has a port on it. We just connected this air hose to that. And when we connect that air hose, this screws onto the top of the nitrogen bottle or on top of the carbon monoxide bottle. And when we did the carbon monoxide bottle, we hook this up and plug into the port just on the side at the bottom of the CO monitor, and you open this valve, and it's either on or off on this one. There's no potentiometer, there's no flow gauge you have to adjust. It's either on or off.
And it pretty quickly, we watched the numbers go up right up to 50.
Right to 50.
I think it was off by 1.
It was off by 1, and we just adjusted it from 49 to 50.
Yep.
And so that's pretty simple. Well, then we disconnect it from the bottle and hook it up to the nitrogen bottle to clear all the CO out of the sensor. And then just turn your air valve back on. And when you turn your air valve back on, because you do want to shut off that air before you do the calibration. So we just shut the air valve off before we did the calibration and bled the air out of the system, did the calibration, and then turned the air back on, and it went right back to 0. And yours fluctuates between 0 and 2 parts per million, which is perfect. And so pretty simple process. It should be done once a year. It does come with a complete how-to book in the in the packaging, so it's pretty simple to do.
How many calibrations do you think this kit would be able to produce?
It depends on, that's the hardest question, because it depends on how long you waste
Okay, so
waiting for
how
it
long
to go up or
takes
down,
to
but
adjust?
usually it's going to probably do 30, 40 calibrations, so it's pretty easy to do.
Yeah, it didn't take very long when we were back there.
No, it's pretty quick process. The whole thing takes a few minutes.
Yep.
And we do have representatives across the country that if you have one of these, you can contact them with questions about calibration. We used to be able to ship the calibration kits from our location, but we can't anymore because of the compressed gas. So it comes out of California from the company that makes the calibration kits for us. So they do the drop ship directly to the location. Otherwise, many times our local representatives have the kit. Or you can send, that's the bigger problem, send them to us. I think we charge $89 to do the calibration, or we can do it in the field. And the representative would just has to fill out an invoice to usually to the shop's distributor.
Right.
And then they handle billing to the shop. But it's a pretty simple process, and it's once a year. It's not overwhelming costs.
It is. I worked with you on the calibration back there earlier, and I always like to err on the side of caution whenever it comes to anything health and safety related. And I looked at this as straightforward enough. The only time I'd say I'd phone a friend for help is if I saw something unusual.
Yeah.
At that point in time,
Yep.
I'm going to pick up the phone and call Tony.
Yep. Yep, that's the best way. So, no, that's the system. And
So this will
calibration.
last a shop quite some time.
It'll last a long time.
I know you said filter maintenance every 6 months, but how long does a unit good for?
The filter units, really, they can last for as long as we continue making cartridges. And we literally are making, I started here in 1996, and the 300 series filter that we had then, we still sell cartridges for.
Right.
And so there were some previous to that were in almost another century. And we did stop making them for some of the really old stuff. But the stuff for the last 24, 27, 28 years, we're still making cartridges for. So,
That is
and
good
many
to
of
know.
those filters are still in use. It depends on obviously your level of maintenance.
Does it make any difference whether I've got a rotary screw or piston compressor?
No, it doesn't. The bigger question is, because everybody thinks, well, if I'm going to get a new compressor, I may need a screw compressor. And if you're going to work that thing every day and use it all day long, I would go with a screw compressor. If you're someone that doesn't necessarily use it all day long, you use it once in a while, use compressed air, not that often, am I beating it up too hard? Piston compressors are still a great choice. The filtration afterwards and everything is still the same. Matter of fact, a screw compressor many times has more oil being injected into the line than a piston one does, simply because it runs on rotary on gears, and we pour a lot of synthetic oil into a screw compressor that's going to get injected if it doesn't have filtration, at the compressor, and most of them have a onboard compressed air filtration just to stop some of that oil. And then from there, it's on us, to make sure we provide the right filtration downstream. But no, I would say piston or screw both work depending on your needs of use.
Okay, very good. Any other thoughts or comments?
Again, not being a production shop, it didn't hurt us or hinder us in any way to have the system down. But what would a typical shop consider, like time-wise, to have downtime for an installation?
Well, the
of one of
nice
these
thing
units?
is with the Dan-Am Air system, it's very quick. And in any of the installation manuals, whether it's, all of the plumbing manuals to everything, this system, the Dan-Am Air system, takes a third of the labor time that putting in black pipe or stainless or copper does. And so the great news is when we're shut down, it's literally push to connect. And so you can put it up very quickly. We're also not using cutting oil to cut threads into a pipe, and we're not filling all our pipes in the shop with oil, because very seldom do you see an installer go buy wax and grease remover that's maybe a water base and flush every pipe after they've cut their threads and then blow them dry. No one does that. They just put them up,
Right.
and you absorb into your paint system whatever got injected into it at the cutting point or installation point. Also, so that's a big deal. The shop shutdown time is very, very quick. And that part of it is great. That really affects business. The other thing is it's lightweight. So one person can get up on a ladder or up on a lift and take a 20-foot stick of pipe, and you go up and you pre-screw our mounting brackets into the wall, and just it sets in them. They'll snap right in. And if you decide you want to put a drop on that pipe, you can mark wherever you want your drops on, and then take it down, drill those holes to do the drops or mark it. But it's pretty simple and pretty fast.
Yep.
That way, it's super lightweight. You start hanging stainless steel through a whole shop or steel. You do have to be a little cautious on what you hang that from, and make sure your building can hold that, where these are exceptionally lightweight. So those kind of things are of great benefit. They move air so much better than a rough surface.
Right.
And all of the fittings are 100% flow through. There's no restriction in any of the fittings. All of our fittings have 3 O-rings inside plus grip teeth. So where others that are out there only have 1 O-ring and a set of grip teeth, and the O-ring is over the top of the scratches that the grip teeth made on many of those competitors. So with us, we only need 1 holding bracket every 10 feet if you're running at the length of a shop. So it's that part of it. The installation is super fast, and for that, when we have installers that start putting these in, then they realize that they can get 3 times as much done in a week. So that part of it's nice. So, and for the shops, that's a big benefit.
Yeah, and then from that short video clip we showed earlier, our previous unit was quite large. I think it was almost as tall as I was.
Yeah.
And the footprint of this, much, much smaller.
Yeah, we're literally looking at something this wide on the wall, and we moved all the plumbing back to the wall. You gained a whole new storage area in behind the booth. Hiding spot.
That's
It's a bigger hiding spot now,
yeah.
Bigger hiding spot. But that part of it is nice.
All right, very good. I think we're pretty much wrapped up here.
I think that pretty much covers it.
Right.
So thank you so much for tuning in. If you do have any questions, you can email us at repairsrealm@i-car.com, and someone will get back to you.
And Tony, thanks again for your assistance with all this.
Thank you guys. Glad to be here.
Thank you.